to What Happened on the Job. We are episode 18 now. This is our podcast for relatable conversations with contractors that sometimes find a little entertaining as well. My name is Mike. With me, as always, is Brian Summers.
How you doing? And I let that gap
take
there.
over. You're good.
Today we have Sean Leonard from S.L. Leonard Associates. Sean, go ahead and introduce yourself and your company.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So the company is S.L. Leonard Associates, and we're like owners reps. Some people call us project managers or construction managers. So we have about 8 project managers, and we represent clients in the development process. Sometimes we come in the front end and we help them with the acquisition and the entitlements. Sometimes we come in during the design process to help them with the design. But the construction phase is really where we're kind of the constant. So it depends on what our clients, what their expertise is. If they're developers, they sometimes want us to just focus on the contractor and the architect. And if they're not developers, we work for a lot of nonprofits. We'll do everything for them. We'll be like a developer for them. So my background, because it kind of informs what we do, I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And I came to the States as a foreign student to go to college many years ago. And so, being raised in Asia, and, I always thought I was like 3/8 Irish, 3/8 Portuguese, and a quarter Chinese until I did that Ancestry.com, and I found out I'm 48% Chinese and 2% other Asian. And, I'm a mix, which is kind of what America is these days.
Right.
So now I'm a naturalized citizen now. I married my wife, who's a U.S. citizen, like 40 years ago. So coming from Asia, you have to either be a doctor, a lawyer, or an architect. So I actually started off going to Valley College, community college, and took architecture courses. And they ran out of courses, so I switched to engineering courses. And then I ended up transferring to UCLA. Believe it or not, I was recruited for badminton. So UCLA they wanted to start a badminton program. So I'm a Title IX recipient because badminton was sponsored by the women's athletic department.
Right.
But it was a co-ed sport. So they recruited a bunch of ringers. We were the national champions. And otherwise, I probably would not have gone into UCLA. So I switched to civil engineering. So I did that at UCLA. And by the time I graduated, I knew I didn't want to be a consulting engineer. So my first job out of school, they recruited on campus. I worked for a concrete company called SECO, which stands for Concrete Engineering Company. So at that time, they were a Fortune 500 company that had diverse products such as metal buildings, rebar. But I was in the concrete division, which was the biggest division, because they liked people with engineering backgrounds. And I picked them because they also had something that's very unusual these days. They had a 100% tuition reimbursement program. So I went to the other side. At the time, I thought it was the dark side, but now I feel more enlightened. I went to USC for my MBA.
Right on.
Right on. So I did
I liked
that
it better
night.
when you were at UCLA.
Yeah, Mike's a UCLA fan.
Well, I go both ways, it depends on who I'm talking to. So I did that at night, while I was at SECO. And SECO was a great training ground for me because, I was doing sales and marketing and estimating and project management. So I was negotiating contracts, so there were smaller contracts. I wasn't, the general contractor. I did that for about 6.5 years, I think. And then I always wanted to move up the food chain, so being a concrete sub, we were one of the major subs on a project. But, I would spend my time on the structural drawings, the civil drawings, and then I'd look at the architectural and the landscape for reference, but really focusing on structural, because that's where the structural concrete was. That's what we did. And so we did a lot of, high rises, a lot of parking structures. So I had a chance then to move on and become a general contractor. So that was part of my growth, So now I'm seeing the entire project. and getting a better understanding for how these decisions were made. And because of my concrete background, I did a bunch of parking structures for the generals. And parking structures kind of lend themselves to design build. So I got exposed to managing architects and engineers as well. Then I went to another contractor because I thought it was my trophy project. I got recruited to work on Wilshire Courtyard, which is a 1 million square foot Class A office building in the Miracle Mile district of Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
So I actually left my other firm after only 11 months. I'm quite embarrassed to say that. But, Wilshire Courtyard was just huge. And I thought, I may never get an opportunity like this before. So, and MH Golden was a company, great company, probably the second best company I ever worked for. S.L. Leonard, of course, being the best. So I worked there for a few years, got promoted to project executive. And then my move to Ventura County came when my boss from MH Golden left, went to coal development, coal construction. So it was a development company that had its own construction group. And they had a 92-acre site in Camarillo, which they said, we're going to build that out. It's going to be a bunch of spec buildings and build-to-suits, distribution and office space, low-rise, because it's out in Ventura County. So they hired me, and so I was overseeing the infrastructure of this 92 acres. So the project didn't really work out. So we went into a land sales program, so we subdivided it. Then it kind of sat empty for a while, and then a outlet mall developer, Chelsea, bought it, and now it's a huge success. It's the outlet mall in Camarillo, many, many years later. And then eventually I got the opportunity to move up another step in the food chain, and I worked for a company called LaSalle Partners. And then they merged with Jones Lang Wooten, became JLL now, but LaSalle Partners was a national real estate firm, and they had a small group called the Development Management Group, which is kind of what we do now at S.L. Leonard. So at LaSalle, we would manage developments on behalf of clients, and with them it was pension funds and institutional investors. So I did that for a while, and that was a great learning experience because now I was totally on the owner's side and managing the entire process. I really got to understand entitlements. That's all the approvals that have to happen, before you even break ground. So, being on the contractor side, I never was exposed to that. And then worked for other contractors, most recently for PCL. So I was hired by this company that PCL was a joint venture in called A.T. Curd, and then PCL eventually took them over while I was there 100%. And so they hired me to go manage a development in Las Vegas. So they hired me, and I started in January 1, and then the Northridge earthquake hit. And they said, well, you're available. We want you to manage all our earthquake work, earthquake repair work. So I did that, and it went well, made a bunch of money, not because we were predators, but, my boss said, look, go to all our clients and anybody else calls us, we'll just do it for cost plus 10%. Because this company self-performed the work. They didn't sub it out. The concrete work we self-performed. We had our own crews. So usually when you self-perform, you have higher margins.
Yeah.
Like a GC that subs everything out, might have a fee of 3-5%. But when you're self-performing, maybe it's 15-16%. If you told me, just tell them it's going to be cost plus 10%. But some of those people, one being the county and one was another developer, they insisted on a lump sum. Another one insisted on unit prices for different things that we weren't familiar with. So I was very conservative and made a whole bunch of money. And then the Vegas development never happened. So they created a position for me, and I became the director of pre-construction, eventually for PCL for the Southwest Division. So I was there for about 5 years. Then I got called by this headhunter saying, hey, I've got this confidential project for you. I can't tell you who the owner is. It's several $100 million, and it's in LA. And I'm having worked in LA so long, I said, it sounds like Disney Hall. I said, yeah, it is. And they're looking for somebody to manage that development that has construction experience. And my first reaction was, no, it's a mess. Because I don't know if you guys remember that. They built the parking structure. So it was like 6.5 levels down below grade. And then they stopped. and they put a temporary roof on it, and then they just used that for parking for the courthouse for several years because it was kind of over budget and behind schedule. And so Eli Broad was at that time the chair of the board for this nonprofit called Walt Disney Concert Hall, Inc. So he thought everybody, I better not say that because this might go public, but so he wanted a new team on board. He kept Frank Gehry. So I was part of that group. I was a senior vice president in charge of project management. And my goal was to, negotiate a contract with a general contractor and build the rest of the project. But because of the earthquake, because of the Northridge earthquake, we learned that if we wanted to use a moment frame, maybe this is too esoteric, but a moment frame as opposed to a brace frame, a moment frame kind of bends and tweaks, whereas the brace frame has diagonal and cross bracing that makes it more rigid. If we wanted to stick with a moment frame, we had to test every joint, every unique joint, full size to failure. And I don't know if you saw what Disney Hall looked like when we were putting up the structure. Pretty much every joint was unique, and it would have taken us like 2 years in every testing facility in the country. So we switched to a brace frame, which meant we had to retrofit the garage. So I was an employee of this nonprofit, and our job was to raise the money, get it entitled and approved, and finish the construction. So I was not involved in the fundraising. We had professionals that did that. So we had a big contractor, M.A. Mortensen, who, in the heat of the battle, I didn't appreciate them so much, but now looking back on it and all the hurdles they overcame, they did a really good job. And all the people that are on that project now are some of the most senior people in the company. That was a super experience, working downtown and having, billionaires on our board, and having politicians like Mayor Reardon and Zev Yaroslavsky from the county. So it was really easy getting public approvals and things like that because we had so much clout. Really easy, easy raising money. I mean, I saw some of the letters that our board wrote to politicians and other people, basically saying, not in these words, but hey, we did this for you. We gave you this much money. We expect you to come through with this now. So I was exposed to another world there. So dealing with a lot of really powerful people that are used to getting their own way. There was like one guy who was on our board, a very well-respected developer, many high-rise in downtown LA, a senior guy. And, in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, which Disney Hall replaced, they had something called the Founders Room, which is where the philanthropists, the people that supported it, raised all the money, had their own sort of private club. So we built the Founders Room at Disney Hall. And so this guy, he knew where his seat was going to be, and he came to me one day and said, look, I'm going to be sitting in this section. And so we looked at the plan, and we had, by that time, the bleachers were in, not the bleachers, the concrete bleachers, if you will, and the structural skeleton was in, but, not all the drywall and doors and frames and hardware were there. He says, take me to where my seat is, so we walked, with safety vest, hard hat, we went out to the seat, and then he says, now, show me where the door is going to be that I would take to the Founders Room. Let's walk there now, And then he was looking at his watch. And we walked to the Founders Room. And he says, okay, that's great. It was like, 1 minute, 37 seconds. That's really good because at Dorothy Chandler, it's more like 3 minutes, because at intermission, these guys would go to the Founders Room and all the drinks would be set up there, and he wanted to be the first one in there so he could get the best table. That was really interesting. So after Disney Hall, I was very fortunate because, for the project to be successful, we were worried about the architecture and the acoustics, right? So during construction, we were already pretty comfortable that the architecture was going to be well liked because the main architecture critic of the LA Times loved Frank Gehry. So all through the process, he was writing rave reviews, and that seemed to be the general consensus. Even though the people that I worked with, would make jokes like, "Did you forget your level?" And I have a friend who's an attorney in one of the buildings at Wells Fargo Tower that overlooked the project. He said, "Oh, we had someone out of town come in for a meeting in their conference room overlooked the job site." And he said, "This guy said to me, 'What, are you demolishing a building down there?'" And by that time, we had spent like $100 million construction already, and he thought it was a demolition job. It's a funky looking building. The architecture was pretty well received and generally thought to be a success. And at the end of the day, we were like within 0.5% of our budget, which was fantastic news. But the acoustics were the other thing that we were really nervous about, and we couldn't really test that till we had some of the paneling up and the acoustical material. So that was a huge success. I was lucky because I had a contract. So I was an employee of this nonprofit that was a single-purpose nonprofit, Walt Disney Concert Hall, Inc., that was put together for this purpose. But I was able to sort of let people know, hey, I'll be looking for my next gig come 2004. So I got approached with a bunch of different opportunities, but two of them kind of fell in my lap where one, there was a city Camarillo was looking to build a new library, a public library. And this was right after the hyperinflation of 2013.
Yeah.
And, the Cal State Channel Islands just did a library and it came in like 30% over budget. So the council was really nervous. So they wanted to hire me to look at what's the best delivery system so they can mitigate and control cost overruns. And at the same time, there was somebody from the City of Hope, that's the hospital out in Duarte. They were underway with a new wing, the Helford Replacement Hospital. So that's a couple $100 million project, and it wasn't really going well. So they said, hey, come out and give us an opinion of what you think is going wrong. So I kind of did this on the weekend while I was wrapping up, we're closing out Disney Hall. And so I wrote a report, and, so the city of Camarillo said, hey, we want you to work for us. City of Hope said, we want you to work for us and help us finish this project. So I figured, I might as well hang up my own shingle. So, even though I have an MBA and, I didn't have any business plan, I just, had these two super projects fall into my lap. So I just started my company. And then I had staff that was working with me at Disney Hall that I could put, on the City of Hope, which was the more urgent project. And the Camarillo Library I worked on myself. And then I would,
bounce back and
truck out to the City of Hope occasionally, a couple times a week. And then by accident, you just talk about, how fortuitous things are. I did this talk about project delivery for this organization called SCAMP, Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. I hadn't actually built any nonprofit housing, although I was on the board for a very well-respected nonprofit housing company called the Community of Friends, which does permanent supportive housing, and their focus is on people with mental illness. So it was a great cause to get behind. But I spoke at one of these conferences, and so the CEO of a developer in Santa Monica called Community Corporation of Santa Monica, they build affordable housing. They said, hey, we're looking for somebody to help us manage our projects, and working in Santa Monica, some people call it the People's Republic of Santa Monica. It's not the easiest place to work in. So, they really wanted someone with experience in Santa Monica, which I had as a contractor. And they said, well, have you done any affordable housing? I said, no. So how about housing, wood frame? Oh, yeah. So there was this project called Jan's Court that I did that had 3 levels of wood frame housing on top. And so they hired me for a 27-unit, I think, affordable housing project in Santa Monica. And since then, at S.L. Leonard, we've now done almost 5,000 units of affordable housing. It's become a big part of our portfolio of work, if you will. And it's going to grow even more, I think, just because of the need for affordable housing and the amount of money that's out there. So that kind of brought us full circle. And so S.L. Leonard just started to grow organically and, by word of mouth. Then I started to add staff, and so we have 8 plus myself, 9 project managers, and we have work mainly in Southern California, as far north as Central Coast, Buellton, and as far south as San Diego. But most of the work is in LA and Orange County and Ventura County, of course.
So are you guys? It sounds like obviously the affordable housing is kind of newish to stuff you guys do. Is that where you guys are headed? Or are you sticking with some of the bigger commercial stuff, or where just kind of anything that presents itself?
There was a time, just a few months ago, where I was worried. I thought we had too much affordable housing, and I wanted to do more of the other work we have, which is commercial. We just finished a retail center for Jordan Downs, which is a really underserved area in South LA. Beautiful retail center, 113,000 square feet with prime store development with our client. Really gratifying to do that. And then subsequently, the affordable housing developer just engaged us next door, Bridge Housing, to do an 80-unit affordable housing project. So, I have the joy of working in those kinds of neighborhoods where they really need housing, safe housing, housing that works. Plus, we're bringing the amenities, the retail, grocery store, and getting fresh groceries and so on. But we do a lot of work with other nonprofits, like a lot of schools, like Village Christian, Sequoia School, Occidental College, the Masters University, Charles Drew University. We've done a lot of churches, and we have a couple of church projects right now. We've done many over the years. And what else? We're doing a museum, a children's museum here in Camarillo. So I was thinking I needed to focus more on the non-housing projects, but the housing need just keeps growing, and it's not really being impacted as much as the others. With the virus, we've slowed down a bit because the new projects, the clients aren't pulling the fingers, so the backlog isn't hitting the books as fast as we thought they would. So we're just going to keep going with the affordable housing. I mean, it's really important work, and it's really gratifying. We enjoy doing it. The margins aren't as good as some of the other projects, but it's just something that we like to do.
Yeah. So this is more probably on a personal level. You sound a lot like what my uncle does. My uncle does the same kind of stuff out in Florida. And I can't imagine there's too many of you out there that, from the headhunting perspective, because he gets the same thing. He was actually out here a few years ago because he was being recruited to be the managing super and overseeing the, not LA Live, but the new area that's going up right across the street from Staples Center and all that, with the high rises. But so he used to work for Boba's for a long time. I don't know where he works for now, but I'd imagine you guys could probably are on the same level. It's pretty
Talk shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And LA Live, PCL did Staples Center, and when I was there, we were pursuing it and putting the numbers together and everything. I didn't actually work on that project at PCL, but on the front end.
Yeah, well, there's a new one it's probably close to being finished now, right? With all I think it was like 2 high-rise residential buildings with the shopping and retail down at the bottom there.
There's a bunch. There's one, I think it's called Oceanwide, that's actually stopped construction with a Chinese developer. And I think Webcore is a general contractor. It's just stopped. It's kind of been mothballed now. It's sitting there for months. And that was a several billion-dollar development.
Wow. Yeah.
So hopefully someone will come along and somehow that'll get going again.
So how many projects do you guys try and keep it at one time? Or, are you trying to limit yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. We want to just keep our team busy. And we average probably, when I look at the monthly billings that go out, maybe 35 to 40 unique invoices, but we have one client that we usually have about 20 projects going for them, and they own like 4 high rises and a lot of office and a bunch of retail space. So they engage us to do most of the more difficult work and the larger TIs. So 2 of the high rises in Century City, and they brought the central plant on site. So those are like $5-6 million projects. So we do those and all the public space renovations. Putting in a cafe and the lobbies and so on. And then they have a bunch of retail in Westwood, Brentwood, and so we help them with all the landlord's work. So getting it ready for a tenant that they sign in. And so those projects tend to be smaller, probably on the high end, about $6 million. On the low end, they could be a couple $100,000.
$100,000, yeah. You're doing that much? I mean, simultaneously with 8 or 9 guys, I would imagine. Obviously they're, can't be everywhere at once, but is there a training process, or what kind of process gets put in place to make sure that when your guys aren't there, that things are being done and you don't come back to a mess?
Yeah, that's a good question. And our model is different than a lot of our competitors. Many of our competitors, the way they make money is the multiplier on their staff, right?
Right.
And so they'll have a project and they'll try and put 10 guys on it. We tend to have more senior people. The average seniority in our team is probably over 25 years because, we have to manage the whole process. So we can't really have very green people doing that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of good people, but there are a lot of other people that want to take advantage of our clients. So we tend to have more senior people, and if we get in early enough, we'll always recommend to our client, let us help you build a collaborative team, so that our focus during the development is to help the architect and help the contractor remove their roadblocks, as opposed to fight with them and try and ding them and show the owner, look, hey, the contractor tried to do this to you, and we caught them, we busted their balls, and we don't want to do that. We want to try and get the right team involved. So most of our projects are more collaborative, and at the end of the day, a successful project is the client gets their building on time, under budget, and the contractors and the architects make their projected fees. Luckily, most of our clients aren't trying to get us to just arbitrarily. And I've had some, like, I'm thinking whether I can tell this story or not. It's one of my big nonprofit projects, right? And the board member was a very well-known person, one of the richest people in LA. And we went, hey, here's the pricing from the contractor. I think at that time it was I'm just throwing out numbers, these aren't exact, 190 million. And his response was, F them. If they're telling you 100, they can do it for 160. Tell them give them 160. But that's the way some people, like to negotiate. Doesn't happen that often, but occasionally.
Are you guys? Do you find yourselves pricing? Is your model on income more performance based, or is it just straight fee based on the size?
Yeah, typically it's straight fee based for the pre-construction side, because that is really hard to project. Because you're dealing with the public entities and
permits and everything else, and
and the general public as well. So we normally will do that on an hourly basis. Once we start construction, we have a pretty good handle on it, and we'll convert to usually a monthly lump sum fee. So we'll calculate. Well, we're probably going to spend 20 hours a week on this project, and we'll project that out with the fee.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we'll do it on a percentage basis. It's really hard to calculate, and we like to sort of be on the same team as the owner. So we want to set ourselves up so that we don't benefit if the owner has to pay more money or take more time, and so we want to be able to look after them rather than try and protect our fee throughout the process.
Right. So you actively, I imagine, like you said, with the seniority on your team, it's not just like you can find a guy that's going to be able to, or girl, step into what you guys do at the level you guys do it. Are you actively recruiting people, or how are you going about?
Yeah.
Are you looking to grow to try and get more work, or where you guys?
Good question. Yeah, and I think you kind of asked me that, and I didn't answer properly. So
no. Yeah.
We actually have, of the 8 other project managers other than myself, 4 are women. Very accomplished.
Oh, perfect.
One is a licensed structural engineer with a master's degree. The other one has a master's from Cornell. And one has, Berkeley undergrad, USC.
So a bunch of slackers on your team is what you
Yeah, I know. You know what they say, right? Surround yourself with smart people.
Right.
Yeah. So, I've been teaching. I've taught at USC and I've been teaching at UCLA for about 30 years now. And so that has been a really good resource for finding people.
Yeah.
Because the UCLA class is in the extension program. So there are a lot of people that are looking to either move up, advance in their career, or to change careers. So we have contractors, architects, subcontractors, lawyers, engineers. So we get exposed to a whole bunch of people. Now, 2 of my colleagues are also teaching at UCLA. So that's been
it's like your own little internship program.
Yeah. I know. It's, so you get exposed to somebody for 12 weeks and you get a good sense for what they're like. I can't actively recruit them, but usually after the class is over, they'll approach us.
Right.
And so, we, as I mentioned, we can't have many green people. The younger folk, if we have larger projects and really justify a bigger staff, then we can bring in younger people. But usually we're looking for someone that's really cut their teeth in one industry and has an idea of the big picture. So the backgrounds of my team are, architects, contractors, engineers, and so on. So most of us have spent a portion of our career in one segment of the development process, and then have kind of crossed over to the owner's side.
So we don't typically like to talk insurance, but because we are insurance guys and it's just kind of running through my head, I feel like I have to kind of ask you, how do you set up your contracts from a liability standpoint as far as how much you guys are taking on and what you're passing through to the subs and vice versa? Mm-hmm. Just because it's we deal mainly with contractors who have their own employees in this role, right? And obviously, as a general contractor, you take on that liability and you pass on some to the sub as far as what they're doing. But to have an independent person in that position, I'm just kind of curious how that works from a contract standpoint.
Yeah, good question. So, we'll have our contract with the owner, and then we will, let's say the construction, for instance, maybe we'll do an RFP, RFQ, and then we'll interview several firms, and then we'll select. No, actually, we typically will just hire the contract on behalf of the owner.
Okay.
And then if the owner wants to be involved, we'll do our analysis and say, here are the ones we think we should interview, and then we'll kind of run the interview. Then we'll write the contract, but the contract's between the general and the client. And then we are the client's representative.
Just an advisor or representative, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't sign any change orders or anything like that.
Right.
Typically what we'll do is we'll put it on a platter for the client. We'll do all the analysis. Say, we recommend that you approve this, and here's why, and so on.
Do you guys, because that's the situation, do you run in any, and I imagine you do, but do you run into any situations where the general is saying, hey, my contract's with the owner, you guys are stepping in, obviously, and the owner's giving you, I would imagine, carte blanche to kind of, run the project, and you tell, and I'm sure the owner passes along to everybody on the project, like, hey, these are my guys, they're going to be overseeing this. But do you run into situations where the general is saying, hey, my contract's with the owner, I don't want to deal with you, or has that been an issue before?
Not really, because the contract will often state that we're the owner's representative, so it's baked into their agreement.
Right.
Although sometimes the contractor will want to get more exposure with the owner, so they'll try to go around us occasionally. We don't see it very often. The relationship that we want the owner to have a lot of exposure is with when we hire an architect. So we may be hiring the architect, but we don't want to get in between there because there's this vision thing. And, a lot of us are engineers and contractors, and we don't always see the vision early on.
Not the art side, right? Just the math.
Yeah. Although we have at least two two architects. But we don't want to be the ones translating the vision.
Right.
So that relationship is really important for the owner and the architect to bond. Even though we manage the process, we review the invoices and so on. Yeah. So now sometimes we'll do what we call as a multi-prime. So if it's a project that doesn't have a lot of trades, like one client wanted us to do a retrofit with solar hot water. So there's a little bit of demolition. There's a little bit of plumbing, running some pipes down, putting in a boiler and so on, and the PV panels on the roof. So we had maybe 5 or 6 subs. So they became prime. So we would bid those trades out, and then we would write the contract between the traditional sub and our client. So because I think the general contractors earn their money with the staff and so on, but with this type of project, we felt that the owner had a property manager there all the time, and so we'd be there a couple times a week. But there was, only really 1, maybe 2 subs working at the same time. So there wasn't a whole bunch of coordination. Yeah. So occasionally we would recommend taking the general out and going with the multi-prime approach.
You mentioned prior, a little bit ago, about some of the issues that whether they're building permits or you specifically mentioned the general population. What are some of the difficulties that you've run across when dealing with just normal citizens as a group in terms of some of the larger projects that you guys have done?
Mm-hmm. Well, we did this project called Charles Drew University in South LA, and demographically, that area has been like 2/3 historically Black, and now it's 2/3 Latino. So we were hired to do this nursing school, and then a parking structure, and then a cafe and a few other things. But the big one was the nursing school. It's about 65,000 square feet. So we had some federal money. So we had these maybe WEB requirements, minority participation.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep.
So we sort of followed the rules and did a really good job. I think we hit 23% MBE participation. So normally that would be a huge success, but there was a group there that thought there weren't enough people on the site that looked like them. And it was a small group, but very vocal, and they would have 5 people out there and they would videotape it. But you know how you can tape something and it looks like a huge crowd, but there's only like 6 people.
Yep.
And so they were kind of threatening us a bit. And I was actually authorized to give them some work. I think I could spend up to like $100,000. If you can find work for them to do to keep them happy. And I was thinking it would be like cleanup or maybe site security or something like that. They came back and they had this list of over $500,000 worth of work they wanted to do. All the trucking on the project, all the security. They wanted to have all. It just got out of hand, and we tried to work through it, and eventually we, and they would bring. Oh, they wanted to do grading too. they showed up on the job one day with a lowboy with a grader on the back, and they told the contractor, "Oh, Sean Leonard told us to come out here," and they'd call me. I said, no, don't let him on the site, because once you get on the site, then you have lien rights, right?
Right.
But so it was really tricky, and then eventually we had to call the sheriffs, to protect the safety of the contractors because they felt threatened. So that's kind of an extreme one. We don't see that too often.
So is it more? Do you guys find really the way you get through that is more of a what's the word? I don't know. Starts with a C. Compromise. There we go.
Compromise.
Yeah, compromising with the other group and trying to figure out best, on a not so extreme level.
Yeah. Well, compromise is a good word, like Disney Concert Hall, we had to sign a project labor agreement, but we had some stuff there, like the organ. We had a $2.5 million organ that had its own superstructure that was being designed and built in Germany and sent out here. So So we got some exclusions from the project labor agreement that the ironworkers would let us hire our own people, non-union, to erect that, because it's kind of like a little jewel box.
Yeah.
They had actually erected it in Germany and they sent it out. And then we had some chairs coming out from Italy, all the seating. So we got 2 or 3 exceptions, and so this is a case of us working together with the different trades, so it would still work, rather than force feeding,
Right.
Another group in there.
Well, Sean, really appreciate you coming on today. I know that you got probably quite a bit to do, especially dealing with the coronavirus and figuring out ways to deal with the affordable housing projects that you guys are working for. If you could just give the people a little bit of plug about yourself and where to find you and how to get in contact with you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I did promise you one story.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Give me a story.
We love stories.
I'm looking at the clock, though, and I'm trying to be mindful.
So I'll go from the story to the plug.
Yeah, we love stories.
So this is Disney Hall again. I don't know if you were around when it was just finishing up, and this was on the radio and on TV, where before it was done, Frank Gehry and S.L. Salonen went into the concert hall, and then the concertmaster, who's the first chair violinist, went up on the stage and played. And it was very a moving piece you hear on the radio. I heard on the radio first, and then I've subsequently seen, I think it's on YouTube. They said we held each other's hands and tears came to our eyes because it was so beautiful. So the sound, that was the big question, right, that I'd mentioned, the acoustics.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. We were real happy. But what has never been said publicly before is that maybe 3 weeks prior to that, the superintendent for the contract said, hey, come down to the hall. I want to show you something. And then about 4 Latino guys showed up on the stage, and we were in the seating area, and they pulled out their violins and started playing mariachi music.
Yes.
So the first concert at Disney Hall was mariachi music. People don't know that.
That's awesome.
The underground concert. That's awesome.
So
you guys had a jump start on knowing how good it sounded for you, huh?
That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the plug for the company, S.L. Leonard, our website is www.S.L. Leonard and Associates, SLLeonard.com. So really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. Stay safe out there.
I will. You too. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Hey, thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far, go ahead and give us a like or 5 stars or whatever means you like us.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And check out our website for more video content and extras.
While you're there, shoot us a message if you want to be a guest. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.